Africa, intra-African trade is less than 30%. If you go to Europe, it is almost anything between 60 and 70%. In North America, it's possibly also between 60 and 70%.
This is a wake-up call to the African leaders to take inventory of what is really happening in their countries. Do they really need...
The African Continental Free Trade Area is a groundbreaking agreement that unites 54 African nations into the world's largest free trade zone. Designed to boost intra-African trade, AfCFTA aims to eliminate tariffs, enhance economic integration, and create new business opportunities across the continent. By fostering collaboration and removing trade barriers, this initiative paves the way for economic growth, industrialization, and a stronger, self-reliant Africa. Whether you're a business owner, investor, or entrepreneur, AfCFTA opens doors to new markets and limitless possibilities in Africa's economic landscape. Why is the implementation of Africa's Inter-Trade Agreement taking so long? The African Continental Free Trade Area was launched in January 2021, promising to transform Africa into a single market of over 1.4 billion people with a combined GDP of over $3.4 trillion. However, despite this ambitious vision, the full implementation of the agreement has faced numerous delays. Many businesses, investors, and policymakers are eager to see the benefits, but challenges continue to slow down progress. Key challenges delaying AfCFTA implementation. 1. Unfinished negotiations on trade rules. For the AfCFTA to function effectively, member states must agree on critical trade rules, including tariff schedules, rules of origin, and trade facilitation measures. While some progress has been made, many African countries are still negotiating. Rules of origin determine the percentage of a product that must be locally sourced to qualify for tariff-free trade. Without clear agreements, trade under AfCFTA cannot proceed smoothly. Tariff schedules outline the goods and services that countries agree to liberalize. However, some nations fear losing revenue from import duties, leading to hesitation in reducing tariffs. Weak infrastructure and logistics bottlenecks. Africa's underdeveloped infrastructure, such as roads, ports, railways, and border facilities, remains a major barrier to free trade. Many African countries lack efficient transportation networks, causing delays in moving goods across borders. Additionally, unreliable electricity and internet connectivity make it difficult for businesses to operate smoothly under AfCFTA. Complex and conflicting national regulations. Despite the agreement, each African country has its own trade policies, customs procedures, and business laws. Harmonizing these regulations takes time and effort. Businesses often struggle with bureaucratic red tape, corruption, and inconsistent enforcement of trade policies. This makes it difficult to create a seamless market where goods, services, and investments can flow freely. Political and economic differences among member states. African countries have diverse economies, ranging from resource-rich nations to those reliant on agriculture and manufacturing. Some governments fear that removing trade barriers could lead to unfair competition, hurting local industries. Others worry about the short-term loss of customs revenue and are reluctant to fully commit to AfCFTA's requirements. The challenge of stiff conditions in international trade. International trade agreements often come with a series of conditions that may seem tough or unfair, especially for developing nations. These conditions might include: A. Unequal terms of trade. Developing countries often face unfavorable trade terms, where they are compelled to export raw materials or low value-added goods while importing high-value finished products. This limits their ability to capture a larger share of the economic benefits from trade, perpetuating the cycle of dependency on foreign markets. B. Structural adjustments and policy constraints. International financial institutions, such as the World Bank and International Monetary Fund, often tie loans and aid to structural adjustment programs that impose austerity measures, privatization of state-owned enterprises, and liberalization of trade policies. While these measures are designed to boost economic growth, they can also lead to increased inequality, unemployment, and reduced access to public services for the poor. C. Trade barriers and protectionism. Many African countries face tariffs, quotas, and non-tariff barriers when trying to export to developed nations. These barriers can make it harder for African businesses to compete in global markets. Although initiatives like the AfCFTA aim to reduce these barriers within Africa, external barriers from developed countries remain a significant challenge. D. Intellectual property and trade agreements. In some trade agreements, African countries may be asked to adopt stricter intellectual property laws that favor multinational corporations rather than local innovators. This could stifle innovation and limit Africa's ability to develop and protect its own technological advancements. The role of corrupt and self-serving African leaders in delaying economic progress. The ambitious vision of Africa's economic transformation, exemplified by the African Continental Free Trade Area, has been significantly hindered by the selfishness and corruption within many African governments. While the agreement is meant to create a single market of over 1.4 billion people, the slow pace of its implementation can be largely attributed to the leaders who have consistently put their own interests above those of their citizens and the collective good of the continent. The root cause, corruption and self-interest. Many African leaders have repeatedly failed to prioritize the common economic prosperity of their nations. Instead, they perpetuate corrupt systems that serve to enrich themselves, their families, and their allies while leaving their populations in poverty. This deeply ingrained corruption has led to inefficiency in governance, delay in implementing vital reforms, and a lack of political will to fully embrace transformative agreements like the AfCFTA. A. Selfishness over continental progress. Many African leaders view regional and continental agreements through the lens of short-term political gain rather than long-term economic benefits for their nations. This selfish perspective leads them to adopt policies that benefit only themselves and their immediate circles, often at the expense of economic integration and sustainable development. These leaders delay or reject reforms and decisions that would promote regional collaboration, choosing instead to protect their power and the status quo. The delay in implementing AfCFTA is a clear example of this attitude. While the agreement promises to enhance intra-Africa trade, create jobs, and boost industries, many leaders continue to impose barriers that hinder its progress. Whether it's through protecting inefficient local industries that only exist to line their pockets or refusing to remove harmful tariffs and trade restrictions, these leaders are actively stalling Africa's potential for economic independence. B. Corruption in trade and investment agreements. Corruption is a major driver of delays in trade agreements like AfCFTA. When government officials are more interested in personal enrichment than in the economic well-being of their countries, they often engage in corrupt practices that prevent fair trade negotiations and the effective implementation of trade policies. AfCFTA, like many regional trade initiatives, requires leaders to make difficult choices that require sacrificing immediate political or economic interests for the long-term benefits of integration. However, corrupt leaders find it more convenient to pocket bribes from multinational companies, accepting lucrative deals that benefit foreign entities at the expense of local industries and economic growth. This creates an atmosphere where African nations cannot fully benefit from regional agreements that could lift millions out of poverty. C. Mismanagement of resources and institutional failures. One of the biggest reasons for the delays in implementing AfCFTA is the mismanagement of resources. Leaders who are more interested in exploiting national resources for personal gain often fail to invest in the necessary infrastructure, institutions, and systems required for the effective implementation of such ambitious agreements. Africa's trade barriers are not just physical, they are also institutional. A lack of effective regulatory frameworks, corrupt customs departments, and inefficient government institutions prevent the smooth flow of goods and services between African nations. This is a direct consequence of poor leadership, which prioritizes personal wealth accumulation over the development of transparent, efficient systems that would benefit citizens. The consequences for Africa. The delays in implementing AfCFTA have far-reaching consequences for the African continent. 1. Continued economic dependence. Without a functioning intra-Africa trade system, many African countries remain heavily dependent on foreign markets. This dependence weakens the continent's bargaining power and leaves it vulnerable to global economic fluctuations. 2. Missed economic opportunities. By delaying the full implementation of AfCFTA, African nations miss out on the opportunity to tap into a $3.4 trillion continental market. This is a huge lost opportunity for businesses, entrepreneurs, and workers who could have benefited from expanded trade and investment. 3. Perpetuated poverty. The lack of integration and economic cooperation between African countries results in higher costs for goods, fewer job opportunities, and weaker industrial growth. Corrupt leaders who delay or prevent these agreements from being fully realized are directly responsible for the continued poverty and underdevelopment of their nations. 4. Erosion of trust in governance. The inability to implement key policies like AfCFTA erodes public trust in leadership. Citizens begin to view their leaders as self-serving, with no commitment to improving the living standards of their people. This deepens the cycle of political apathy and disillusionment, further stalling progress. What needs to change? Africa's leaders must take responsibility for the slow pace of AfCFTA's implementation and work to align their actions with the interests of the people they serve. This means embracing reforms that reduce corruption, invest in infrastructure, and ensure the fair distribution of resources across the continent. 1. Accountability and transparency. Leaders need to be held accountable for the delays in economic integration. Transparency in government actions and decision-making processes is essential to restoring trust and ensuring that policies serve the public good. 2. Investment in infrastructure. For AfCFTA to succeed, African nations must prioritize infrastructure development, roads, ports, and digital systems that facilitate smooth trade. Governments must stop diverting resources to personal gains and focus on building systems that enable efficient intra-African trade. 3. Political will and regional cooperation. The implementation of AfCFTA requires strong political will from all African leaders. This means making tough decisions, even at the cost of short-term political gain, to ensure that the continent reaps the long-term benefits of regional integration. Conclusion: the delays in the implementation of AfCFTA are not just a consequence of complex economic issues or external factors. They are a result of poor leadership, corruption, and selfishness. Africa's leaders must wake up to the reality that their actions, or lack thereof, are directly hindering the continent's progress. Only through transparent, accountable governance and a commitment to the collective good of all Africans can the continent overcome these challenges and achieve the prosperity promised by AfCFTA. If you're enjoying the content, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Hit the notification bell so you never miss out on new uploads. Your support means a lot and helps the channel grow. Let's keep the energy going. Drop a comment below and